Hi there folks, today I'll be working on this small sour cherry sapling here, and I wanted to take you along for that. So I know it will be a bit difficult to see with the thicket and the fence behind it, but I'll try to do my best. First of all, let's see the whole sapling. You can see that it sprouts down here. It's a root sucker. This is a 3-year-old growth. This will be the 3rd year. And up here it starts branching out. I already did a few cuts in the last year, removing the side branches and grafting this and this one with very thin sign wood, so it's not this one was cleft grafted and this one was side grafted. I removed the growing tip and let this branch develop so I can graft in that direction. The idea is to develop the tree towards our yard and not so much towards the neighbors. So now I'll have to graft this branch, and I prepped for that by cutting the tip of the branch sometime in winter. I have some rather thick sign wood from our main cherry variety 1. So I'll be doing whip and tongue graft on this thick branch. Even though it's thicker than the cyan, it's not much of a difference and it shouldn't be a problem. Yes, I hope that you can see how the buds on this original branch, this is the wild sour cherry branch, this bud and this bud here, please focus on my palm. Yes, so they already have greening tips, so they have started developing, while the buds on the cyan, which I grafted last year, are still dormant. This shows us that the original rootstock, the wild sour cherry, has earlier development date, and if I delay much further, I will be missing the window of opportunity for cleanly grafting on this rootstock. This is the main growing tip of the tree. I'll be selecting a thick cyan with the growing tip preserved and more than several buds, because I'm sure that this rootstock will be able to feed and develop this much buds. Most of the energy will be going upwards. So I'll be cutting maybe up to here. And this will be the cyan. Now I don't need to graft this much higher. I prefer to graft lower on the branch, so a less part of the original rootstock remains. So now I'll just trim that branch. Always try to cut at an angle so the water runs off of the cut. And then I have to prepare the cyan to go here on the branch. I fear that none of that video will be in focus, but we'll see. This will be the main bud, which will be the closest to the graft, and I'll just prep below that bud. Whip and tongue is my most versatile graft. It can be applied in many different scenarios, and it's relatively easy to do once you stop worrying about it being perfect. The moment you stop thinking about perfection in nature, your results will improve greatly. So you can see how, please be in focus, so you can see how the elliptical cut which I did ends up above the bud, so the bud will be lower than the graft union. This is a very good strategy for ensuring better take of the cyan, and it's usually precisely this bud that takes. Now I'll just do a similar elliptical cut here. I'm measuring to see if the length is sufficient. I just overlay them. This won't be the typical whip and tongue because the rootstock won't be sharpened in the same way, but it will still have the cambium and the bark removed. Now I noticed that the cut I made leads the water towards the graft, so I'll redo the cut to slant in the opposite direction. Measure again, just a tiny bit more down here. The longer you make the graft union, the length of the cut, the more surface area you have for the cambiums to touch. So if and when the graft takes, you have a higher amount of exchange of nutrients and water. So if you work with longer cuts, then you get more development during the growing season. I'm now cutting slightly the tongue. Notice that I don't push the knife towards the cyan, but I push the cyan towards the knife, and that lowers the chances of splitting the cyan completely. And when I'm cutting the tongue on the rootstock, I don't force the knife down, I just rock it back and forth, because if you force a sharp knife downwards, it could easily split the rootstock. And I have done that on many occasions during the years in which I practiced grafting. And now it's just a matter of splicing those two together, making sure that the cambium layers align. I'll make a tiny bit of a cut here to help them Yep, that will be good enough. So now that I did this graft, I don't need to put grafting wax on top of the sand because it has terminal buds. Try to get you closer so you can see the graft union before I wrap it. And here it is. You can see it's nicely corresponding to one another. So now it's time to wrap that with the grafting tape. There's nothing special about that. You just need to, I usually work the other way around. If you watch a lot of grafting videos, you get advice to start from the top and work towards the bottom so the water will flow off. But in my opinion, a good wrap does not allow any water at all in the graft union, so it doesn't really matter where you start from, and I find it easier usually to work upwards. If your tape breaks, because those biodegradable plastics are rather brittle, just restart and do a couple of loops before continuing. You don't need to tighten it very much, and especially if you're not going to be observing the graft during the growing season, because I'll show you in a minute what happens when you do a super tight wrapping, and then you forget to remove the band. With a vigorous growing sign and a strong rootstock, you can get a really bad defect in the graft union, which is not fatal, but it's certainly not as strong as if you have a clean union. I'm covering this part here as well, so I don't have to put grafting wax on top of that. And I will continue for a couple of loops above the actual graft, and then backwards again. So that's about it. In my opinion, those two buds will start developing, preferably more of them, but I will hem and trim in the June trimming in the summer prune, so I'll keep an eye on that. And while I'm here, I can also trim a bit those two branches, which are buds from the last year's graft, which have grown very tall, almost 50 centimeters, but they have no branching out, and I want to have a low branching cherry here. So I'll do a couple of snips as well. So this is the original cyan which I put, and it developed two of the buds, this one and this one, and they each grew. And now I want to promote branching, so I'm selecting a bud in the direction which I want the branch to develop, and I'm cutting above that bud, slanting away so the water will run away. So those 2 or 3 buds will develop in the directions which they're pointing, and that allows me some freedom of choice as to where to direct the tree and to save myself some work when pruning in the future. And now I want to quickly show you the effect when you forget to remove a very tight graft band. You can see that this is another sour cherry, and I grafted that with sweet cherry on top. But right here, where this thickened part is, I had the band very tight together, and it was non-biodegradable plastic, so it didn't let go the grip during the growing season. And what happened is the tree tried to outgrow that, so it thickened the stem considerably. Those 2 branches developed, this is 2 years ago, and even down here, if it focuses, you can still see the horizontal marks of the original band which kind of grew into the bark. So in order to help that with healing, I did last summer several cuts like that along the length of the tree. This open wound strategy makes the tree grow callus tissue here, so by growing the callus, it will make this whole section thicker, and it will gradually, with the years, even out in size. And you can see here, this is one of the first grafts which I made several years ago. It's not very developed because this whole tree is in the shade. It was cut by the neighbors. As you can see, it's a classical horizontal cut, which is not good, and I'm suspecting that this won't be living much longer, but still I wanted to experiment with grafting. So I did this graft, and you can see how this is the original whip and tongue which I did maybe several years ago, and you can see how the length of the cut is very short compared to that which I did just now. When you're starting grafting, usually you're not confident enough to do the longer cuts, but I find that they're not very hard to make. So this is the graft union. It healed nicely. I removed the tape right away after I saw that it took, and then it developed a nice little crown upwards. It's a cherry, of course, but it grows under this canopy of thick elder and tilia tree on this side, so it's developing slowly, but still, even after several years, you can see that it has set nice fruit buds, and we'll be picking cherries off it in the summer. Okay, and finally for today, I wanted to show you this wild plum, which I grafted with apricot science a couple of years ago, and I wanted to show you when a good graft is made, how quick and well the tree develops. This is the original rootstock. I'll go closer to show you, but just wanted to show the overall structure. This is the original rootstock, and up about at that point I grafted several scions. One of them got broken off by a bird, but the two main branches here, the two main stems, they grew in the first year. This was the original scion, which is thinner than a pencil. In the first year they grew over 1 meter in length, and I trimmed those lengths in summer, and then in the second year they again doubled in size and started forming this great canopy here. I have to come and shorten them because I want them to branch lower, but you can see that a good graft union heals nice, and it allows you to get in just a couple of years a greatly formed, nice looking solid structured tree, which will also start bearing fruit if the frost doesn't kill the flowers. And you can see that it already has set flower buds, and they are starting to get pink in several locations. I deliberately removed many of the flower buds here, but I left some just to test it for frost resistance. I'm sorry, but it's not focusing. So now the graft union, you can see that it still bears like a Z shape here of the whip and tongue. This is the wild plum, and this here is the apricot. You can see a slight difference in bark. This piece here, which is now about 30 to 40 centimeters long up to this point, from the graft union up to this thing, this was about that thin and just a couple of buds longer, but it developed and it grew to a nice thickness, and those are the buds which developed and grew in the first year. You can see how thick those branches are. I snipped one of the branches here, so it branched out. The other one was snipped and it started branching out lower. I removed the growth tip after the second season, and those have to be removed as well. So yeah, it certainly pays to take care of the grafts and to start grafting trees right away. So that was all for today, folks, and I'll see you tomorrow.